The aortic arches are one of the most fascinating examples of evolutionary transformation in vertebrates. Initially formed as paired arteries in the embryo, these arches undergo significant modifications depending on the animal's respiratory strategy, whether it's gills or lungs. Studying the modification of aortic arches in vertebrates helps us trace the shift from aquatic to terrestrial life. These changes reflect how blood flow patterns evolved to support structures like gills, lungs, and systemic circulation. Before we dive into the basic pattern of aortic arches, let's quickly understand the main anatomical structures involved. The main organ, heart. It is the muscular organ that pumps blood into atrial system. In early vertebrate embryos, it connects to the ventral aorta. And ventral aorta is a mid-ventral artery that carries deoxygenated blood forward from the heart beneath the pharynx, and it gives rise to aortic arches. And aortic arches are paired arteries, initially 6 pairs, that arise from ventral aorta and pass through the pharyngeal arches or visceral arches. These connect to the dorsal aorta. These are the vessels that carry deoxygenated blood from the ventral aorta to the gills. And efferent branchial arteries are vessels that carry oxygenated blood from the gill to the dorsal aorta. And dorsal aorta is initially paired arteries that collect blood from the aortic arches and eventually fuse into a single dorsal aorta to supply the blood. Lateral dorsal aorta. These are segments of dorsal aorta that receives blood from aortic arches and contribute to the systemic blood flow. External carotid arteries. These are the branches from the ventral aorta that supply the lower jaw and other external head structures. Internal carotid arteries. These are the extension of the dorsal aorta that carry oxygenated blood to the brain and internal part of the head. Now let's discuss basic plan of the aortic arches or embryonic aortic arches. In vertebrate embryos, the heart connects to the ventral aorta which lies below the pharynx. This ventral aorta gives rise to 6 pair of lateral aortic arches running through the visceral or branchial arches. Each aortic arch consists of an afferent branchial artery carrying deoxygenated blood to the gills and a dorsal efferent branchial artery carrying oxygenated blood away from the gills. Dorsally, these arches connect to the lateral dorsal aorta which merge into the dorsal aorta. The anterior dorsal aorta give rise to the internal carotid arteries. The first arch is mandibular arch, the second is the hyoid arch, and the rest are numbered aortic arches, which are third aortic arch, fourth aortic arch, fifth aortic arch, sixth aortic arch. In the embryonic aortic arch system of vertebrates, blood flow begins from the heart from the ventricles, which pumps deoxygenated blood into the conus arteriosus. From there, blood enters the ventral aorta, a mid-ventral vessel running beneath the pharynx. This ventral aorta gives rise to 6 pair of afferent branchial arteries, which carry blood into the gill capillaries, where gas exchange occur in gill-breathing vertebrates. Now oxygenated blood is collected by 6 pair of efferent branchial arteries which deliver it into the paired dorsal aorta. Anterior branches of the dorsal aorta give rise to internal carotid arteries that supplies the blood to the brain and the head. Posteriorly, the dorsal aorta fuse into a single dorsal aorta which contribute the oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. This system represents the foundational plan that undergo significant modification in different vertebrate classes during evolution. We're going to discuss about Pisces, specifically example of Scoliodon. The first mandibular arch disappears, leaving 5 functional aortic arches, which is hyoid arch, which is the second aortic arch, and third to sixth aortic arches. Each arch has one afferent branchial artery and 2 efferent branchial arteries. These arches supplies blood to the gills. The ventral aorta originates from conus arteriosus and sends blood to the arches. The external carotid artery and internal carotid artery supply the head. Rest remain the same. Now we'll talk about amphibians, specifically frogs. At metamorphosis, the gill disappears and so do the first and the second arches. Only third, fourth and sixth arches remain. Third arch is carotid artery, blood to head. Fourth arch is systemic arch, blood to body. Sixth arch is pulmocutaneous arch, blood to lungs and skin. Ductus caroticus between third and the fourth aortic arch disappears. Blood becomes fully oxygenated after the lung development. Fourth aortic arch along its lateral dorsal aorta forms the systemic arch. Now we'll talk about reptiles, uromastyx. Gills are absent. Again, only third, fourth and sixth aortic arch persist. The ventricle is partially divided and the ventral aorta splits into three vessels. Right systemic arch, which is the fourth aortic arch, left systemic arch, also from the fourth aortic arch, pulmonary arch from the sixth aortic arch. Both systemic arches form a dual aortic arch system, one from each side. Oxygenated blood from the left ventricle enters the right systemic arch and carotid artery, which is third aortic arch. Mixed or deoxygenated blood from the right ventricles flows into the left systemic arch and pulmonary arch. Now we'll discuss about aves, specifically in pigeon. Similar to reptiles, only the third, fourth and sixth aortic arch retain, but now the ventricles are completely separated. The ventral aorta splits. Right systemic arch, which was fourth aortic arch, continues as the only systemic aorta. Third aortic arch, which is carotid artery. Sixth aortic arch, which is pulmonary artery. The left systemic arch disappears, leaving only the right aortic arch to form the dorsal aorta. This completes the separation, support efficient double circulation. Finally, we'll talk about mammals, specifically rabbit. Again, only third, fourth and sixth aortic arches are retained. The ventricles are completely separated. The ventral aorta splits into two, a systemic aorta from the left ventricle and a pulmonary aorta from the right ventricle. Modification in arches are: third aortic arch is carotid artery, fourth aortic arch is systemic aorta, only left arch persists. Sixth aortic arch is pulmonary artery. The right systemic arch degenerates and only the left systemic arch forms the dorsal aorta. The evolution of aortic arches is a striking example of how vertebrates adapted from aquatic to terrestrial life. What began as blood vessels supplying gills became The evolution of aortic arches is a striking example of how vertebrates adapted from aquatic to terrestrial life. What began as blood vessels supplying gills became the foundation for carotid arteries, systemic circulation, and pulmonary arteries in higher vertebrates. From fishes to mammals, the modification of these arches support the growing complexity of respiration and circulation and help us understand the evolutionary lineage of vertebrate classes. That's all for this video. Thank you.